things are done politically is not as a democratic society as it's normally been conceived. Quite the contrary. It's not, the way that democratic society is normally defined is one man, one vote, providing this unity of society. It's not, it's quite the contrary. It's not that way at all. That's really more of a smoke and mirrors illusion. In reality, the way that the day-to-day government of in the United States society is run is through lobbying groups and special interests. That's the way the political body is run. Out of these lobbying groups and special interests, they lobby Congress, and then certain laws come forth that produce bureaus and agencies. These bureaus and agencies take on a life of their own. They are peopled by career bureaucrats who are non-elected officials. So they essentially circumvent the electoral process altogether. They usually tend to come forth out of these lobbying interests of big business and big corporate capitalism. That's the way this law comes forth, and an agency comes forth out of that. It's peopled by these non-elected officials who then provide an agenda and a policy. Some of these agencies are like the Central Intelligence Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Homeland Security, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which a lot of people might remember from the Katrina disaster. They were actually, some of the people in Katrina said they actually almost were an orchestration, actually were orchestrating it, were causing more problems than they were actually alleviating the emergency disaster because of the way their policies were set up. Another one is the Bureau of Indian Affairs that has caused irreparable damage to the trust interests and the trust lands of Native Americans. Another one, as an example, is the Bureau of Land Management. Those of you who know about the horses and bison know how their policies and their actions have affected horses and bison. These are internal policies. They're very insular. They're very self-preservative, these bureaucracies and these agencies, and they have their own internal policies. Once these policies are set, you're not going to change them by petitioning your elected officials. You're not going to change the issue by the ballot box or by turning out the vote or registering voters or what have you, because that's not the way the political system functions today. I don't think it was ever really meant to function the way that the democratic society said it wasn't. In any case, it was always a very colonialistic viewpoint of this noblesse oblige, or this hierarchically, male-dominated hierarchical structure. The way you tend to change things in this political system is through lobbying interests and special interest groups. You have to form your own lobbies and special interest groups. The reason Native Americans have special proprietary rights and are in a really good position if, for example, I advocate our organization having some kind of plan or legal bill passed that regards or acknowledges us as an indigenous peoples organization with that status. If that were to happen, then a lot of other laws regarding indigenous people kick into effect. That's why it's something that really needs to be looked at and done. The National Historic Preservation Act would kick into effect, for example, which would force the United States government to look on our organization in a government-to-government relationship, and we would be able to provide from religious and cultural perspectives, be able to provide protection for the horses and the bison. That's just one example. The Clean Water Act kicks into effect, and water rights for American Indians kicks into effect. That's another whole issue. A lot of people are concerned about the compromising of the water, so the drinkable water supplies now, the potable water supplies. A lot of these factors would kick into effect because of because of indigenous people's rights. These rights are also acknowledged internationally by the recent, 2 years ago, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So there's a lot of aspects that would kick into effect if we could obtain acknowledgement from the United States government and the other nation states around the world. Okay, now the third point I want to make is, how did this corporate capitalism, how did it evolve into the general labor force? Well, the general labor force, the first major corporation in the United States were the railroads. The railroads were essentially they actually hired the U.S. Corps of Engineers to actually manage and set up their management potential. The actual structure of how military machines are managed actually goes back to the 1560s to a man named Maurice of Nassau, who was the Prince of Orange. He was the great uncle, coincidentally, of William III of Orange, who was the individual that in the early mid 1600s, around 1650, set up the Bank of England, out of which a lot of the international banking concerns are tied today, including the United States Federal Reserve Bank. Okay, I might mention also another one of the agencies that's very important in its financial aspect is the Treasury Department of the United States, which is a veritable revolving door between the big banks and Wall Street interests and the Treasury Department itself. The head of the Treasury Department currently is Tim Geithner, who was came directly from the CEO position of the New York branch of the Federal Reserve. Before him it was Henry Paulson, who was the head of Goldman Sachs, which was a major Wall Street financial services industry, and he was the CEO of that. He came directly from Goldman Sachs into the position of the Secretary of the Treasury. So there's actually not even any smoke and mirrors aspect of that. It's just a direct relationship between these big corporate concerns and lobbying groups and the financial services industry and the Department of the Treasury. They just kind of revolve back and forth, almost like one unit. Getting back to how this structuralization of the military entered into the general corporate capitalist labor force, Maurice of Nassau, he was the one who devised how to make man almost a robotized very, very efficient killing machine with these drills he devised of load, aim, and shoot, load, aim, and shoot, load, aim, and shoot, without having a human being cognitive thought or any kind of compassion come forth about the damage you were doing when you shot and killed something, torture and damage. But it was just sort of a